Have you ever had a moment when your day and perhaps your sense of safety changed in an instant? What happens when life interrupts your plans in a way that you never saw coming? How do we respond when someone else's actions create consequences we didn't want and that we didn't choose?
Thanks for joining us today at the Healing Medicine Podcast. Who are you listening to? I am Dr. Jessie Mahoney, and my co host is Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang. We are two board certified physicians who bring decades of experience to the conversation about wellness. If you crave more ease and aspire to rediscover your love for medicine and life, one mindful step at a time, you are in the right place. We hope you'll love today's episode, and if so, please share it. A reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice.
Welcome to today's episode, When Life Hits You, Mindful Lessons from a Hit and Run. This is a special solo cast. It's been quite a while since I recorded a solo cast, so thanks so much for joining me. I never planned to record an episode about a hit and run accident. I experienced a lot after the accident besides the physical pain, the emotions, the uncertainty, practical challenges, but also the opportunities to notice how I was relating to each unexpected moment. As physicians, caregivers, and human beings, we spend a lot of energy preventing things from going wrong. And yet, by definition, life remains unpredictable no matter how much or how long we prepare. This experience reminded me that mindfulness isn't about trying to control outcomes, it's about how we meet what is already here. So, in this episode, I'd like to share some of the lessons that emerged in the aftermath of the accident, not because I've perfected them, but because I'm still learning them, still processing them. And my hope is that you're going to find support for navigating your own unexpected disruptions, challenges, surprises with a little bit more mindfulness, self compassion, and trust. So, I wanted to be open about the accident. And so, I'll tell you the story of what happened. So, about a month ago, I was driving to my dentist, who I am seeing for my TMJ pain, my jaw pain. And it was rush hour along a very, very busy highway. So much so that I noticed multiple cars and trucks trying to merge in the lane right next to me. And knowing that I eventually had to merge into that same lane, I instinctively slowed down to adjust to the changing motorway's conditions. But unfortunately, for whatever reason that I will never know, the woman that was driving behind me either failed to keep her distance, failed to keep paying attention, but she basically rammed the back right rear of my car. This was probably going at least 65 miles an hour, if not higher. But I was going that speed at least at the same time. And she proceeded to pass me after ramming my car, threw her hands up into the air, and looked at me as if it was my fault, thinking that we were going to pull off to the side of the road to exchange information because, in fact, regardless of the situation, she had made contact with my car. I started to pull off to the side of the road. And I saw that she was starting to do the same. But then, for whatever reason, she sped off. So she sped off, weaving in and out of traffic. And I was honestly in shock, in physical shock and mental shock, not wanting to remain on the side of the road on a busy, ongoing highway situation. I went ahead to my dentist's office, parked in the parking lot, and walked in for my appointment, still thinking that I could somehow manage to go through with the appointment. But as I was checking in, I realized that I was quite shaken up and that I needed to file a police report, at least call 911 to let people know what had happened. And so after starting to fill out the check-in information, I thought to myself, what am I doing? Like I'm in no state to be able to proceed with this dentist appointment. And so I went back to the car, called 911 to explain what had happened. And the dispatcher said that actually someone else had called 911 on my behalf, sending an ambulance out for me because they thought that I was hurt. So I said that I had already left the scene because I didn't feel safe to continue to stay at the scene because it was still rush hour highway traffic right next to me. And then the dispatcher did say that the car that was mentioned that had hit me was of a certain color and it was a certain make. So that was really helpful information that this Good Samaritan witness did provide. So after that, I went to the police station and started to file a report. But the police officer that came out to talk to me did mention that if I was able to pull any dash cam footage off of my camera, then it would be a different filing process and not just a report made that was labeled as no follow-up, so that I wouldn't be pursuing any criminal charges or wouldn't be any named suspects, for instance. And throughout all of this, I was keeping my husband updated of the information that was coming in. I then proceeded to urgent care because I was feeling some low back pain and knew that I needed to seek care in case something emergent was in the process of happening to my back. And so I went and had a physical exam, and luckily there were no warning signs or alarm signs. And I got prescribed a whole bunch of different medications for pain and muscle relaxation. And then I went home eventually. But one more thing before I forget is that my husband actually met me at urgent care, which was really loving of him. And I really appreciated. And he drove with me to the car service center to see if I could get any dash cam footage. But unfortunately, because the impact wasn't strong enough, which I have my own qualms and concerns about that, and that I didn't trigger an manual uh, recording session, the footage had already been wiped. So after a lot of anger and frustration about that situation, I eventually went home and then was kind of the processing and the healing process. And honestly, I was in shock. Um, I kept to myself for much of that day, and I even showed up for a consultation meeting as scheduled, was able to be present there. So I was able to compartmentalize what had happened a few hours before that meeting, since I had already taken care of all of the logistical issues for the time being. I felt that I was able to continue on with this other meeting for work, but realizing that the next few days were going to be really challenging for me physically because indeed my back did start getting pretty tight and stiff and painful, such that I did have to resort to the medications to help with the back pain that resulted from the accident. But then from a mental health perspective, because I was really, really shaken, rattled, just a mixture of emotions from disbelief that another human being wouldn't stop to check on another human being that they had just inflicted injury to, albeit inadvertently, but still, even just the human accountability that was lacking there. Um, the fact that this woman driver committed either a misdemeanor or a felony because the impact of the car resulted in my harm, and how there wasn't going to be any justice served because there wasn't any way to track this woman at that time. Even asking the police officer if there were cameras up in the highways that they could access to get a license plate. He said that there weren't. I could have publicized the situation on social media and asked for witnesses to come forward, but honestly, I was in such a rattled, scared, anxious state of being that that bandwidth wasn't available to me at that time to even think about posting what had happened and asking for witnesses so close to the incident. What was really helpful, though, was that I immediately knew I wanted to debrief from a mental health perspective. And so I made a pretty last minute appointment with my therapist to debrief the whole situation. And that was tremendously helpful. And the piece of advice that I will never forget is that she invited me to set a deadline for how to move past this event. That within 2 to 4 weeks of the accident, to make a very conscious, intentional decision to either post on social media and ask for witnesses to come forward so that we could try to reprimand this driver that caused the accident, or to basically let it go. And I came to the conscious decision that I would be letting it go. I'm grateful that I had insurance, both health and car insurance, to be able to cover the damages inflicted on my car and also to undergo the treatments that I needed to heal my back and also my mental health. That I didn't want to potentially inflict any retaliatory pain on this other woman. Something that my therapist also brought up was that this other driver made a very intentional decision, for whatever reason, not to stop at that moment. Maybe she was undocumented, maybe she was underinsured, maybe she was uninsured, maybe she didn't have a license. So something was causing fear in this other driver as well, is my best speculative take on it. And that if I had or continued to pursue to try to find her and to try to bring justice to this situation, that I could inadvertently be causing her harm, even if it meant that justice would be served. So, really getting deep down into my own values of authenticity and compassion. For me, and maybe this is a mental health way of moving through it that seemed healthy and in my own service and in alignment with myself, was that I decided to let go of pursuing her as the driver of this hit and run accident and press charges or file her insurance for claims, uh, because I didn't want to inflict any further harm. That was my decision, and I've moved beyond it. It's now been about a month since the accident, and while I'm still dealing with some of the physical consequences and mental consequences, I'm overall much, much better and in a much better headspace to be able to share all of this with you. So, coming back to lessons learned from everything that I experienced, now I'm in a place where I can get really, really curious about that accident and walking through some of the processing that I did with you. Because in the immediate minutes and even the days after, I was pretty much in a state of shock. What I should have done, and this may not be helpful, but what I should have done in a hit and run accident is pull over to the side of the road and call 911 right then and there at the scene of the crime. But forgiving myself, being self compassionate, I was doing the best that I thought I could at the time. And I didn't feel safe pulling off to the side of the road on a very, very busy highway during rush hour traffic. And yeah, so you can definitely imagine how you might or should have responded during a crisis. And the reality of how the situation actually unfolded and how you reacted, interestingly, can reveal both vulnerabilities and our own strengths and resiliency. So, perhaps the first lesson from this hit and run accident is simply that when something is arising that is unexpected, a surprise, a shock, notice what's actually happening without demanding and resisting that it be any different. I mean, there was no help if I denied what had happened or if I resisted what had already happened and what was in the process of happening. So, the other aspect of when uncertain, surprising things happen of this particular hit and run is that the responsible person left. So many unanswered questions, lots of anger, lots of frustration, lots of disbelief came up. I really wanted some sort of resolution. I really wanted to seek justice or at least an explanation of like, why did you leave the scene? Why did you leave without checking on me as another human being? And so there was a lot of discomfort surrounding that uncertainty. I felt a lot of physical tension, not just as a result of the accident, but this kind of knot in my stomach of the disbelief of and the hurt, really, like the mental hurt, the spiritual hurt of another human being, knowing that she most likely physically harmed me but didn't choose to hold herself accountable for that action and those consequences. And so I felt initially pretty alone in navigating all of the logistical legal aspects of it. Had to go to the police station, was calling 911 alone, um, went to urgent care alone. And then it was because I had told my husband almost immediately after the fact, he showed up at urgent care for further support, which was so greatly appreciated. And at the time, I remember thinking, oh, you don't need to show up and you don't need to come. Like, I've got this. But in retrospect, it was really, really great to have a loved one with me navigating this pretty traumatic experience. So I had to file with my insurance company, had to set up repairs, had to set up a rental car, all of the adulting that comes from having a car in the repair shop, um, navigating claims forms, all of that came with the consequences of this. And yeah, it cost me a lot of energy and time, and also a lot of emotional costs, that anger, the rumination. There was some mental replaying of events, even though I'm much better now. the energy spent imagining alternative outcomes, like had she stopped, had I chosen to have social media help with identifying her car, her license plates, her as a driver. And then honestly, it was just very tiring too, because during the accident, I was in fight or flight mode. It didn't seem like it was that hard of a hit because my car was still moving forward at pretty great speed. But clearly, after all of that adrenaline wore off, my body definitely let me know that it was a pretty hard hit. So, in helping myself go through this processing of the hit and run accident in the healthiest way possible, I wanted to go over some of the things that were helpful for me. I had to accept the fact that this had happened in all of its glory, all the different shades of the very uncomfortable emotions and the discomfort of the physical pain. So I had to accept all of that just as it was because it was already there. It had already happened. Remembering that acceptance is not approval. Like I certainly didn't approve of her doing any of this driver doing any of this. I didn't approve of different aspects like the law enforcement not being able to help in ways that I thought that they would, the dash cam video footage not saving like I thought it should. Really, there was and still is, I definitely haven't completely let go, but it's mostly already released. I will probably say that, and that's why I'm recording this now. That ultimately I had to let go of what couldn't be controlled, even though I wished so much that things were different. And I needed to release that control and the desire for things to be any different so that I could create space for caring for and setting intentions to what I actually could control, which would be how I interacted with all of the various facets of claims and insurance companies, and then getting the help that I needed. The other thing that I noticed after this event was how I immediately, except for my husband, wanted to not share the burden, quote unquote, of what had happened with other family and friends. And I immediately recognized as a false belief that family and friends love you unconditionally and they're there for you in hard times and in good times. And so later that day, I did start sharing with my close family and friends. And the kindness that resulted really was comforting and was quite healing for me. So the support from my loved ones, and even just in retrospect, the support from even a stranger having called 911 on my behalf to send an ambulance for me to check up on me, even though the person who is responsible for causing the physical injuries didn't. I mean, that Good Samaritan also was tremendously helpful and kind of continued to restore my faith in humanity, honestly. So that small moment, those few minutes that Good Samaritan spent in calling 911 for me, really meant so much. And that this difficulty revealed this human connection, like that, even though this driver intentionally chose not to check up on me and to take responsibility for her actions, another Good Samaritan sent help, even though I was a complete stranger. So, a theme about kindness after difficulty and allowing for that kindness in that I've talked about before, that this podcast has talked about multiple times before, is that getting help helps. So giving yourself permission not to bottle up your suffering inside, that you can give yourself permission to share about your difficulties, about your struggles, and to actually feel held and supported. Really big shout out to my husband for just basically dropping everything and showing up at the end of my urgent care visit to really just be there for me physically and emotionally, and then to provide some of the tech support because I definitely was too rattled to be able to navigate having to try to retrieve dash cam footage. Friends that I had shared the incident with texted back with tremendous words of support. Friends that ended up calling, offered to call, friends that reached out um, in a pretty timely way to go for a walk a few days after the incident and let me just basically share my story without interruption, without any judgment. They held space for me without judgment. That was tremendously healing. And I hope you're listening. I think you know who you are. And kind of the funny thing was that even some of my friends wished ill upon the other driver, and I realized that like that's not what I hope. I don't want you to wish ill upon that other driver. While I was appreciative of the protective energy of those statements, I definitely realized I didn't ill wish that other driver at all. Like that would be in, and that is in complete misalignment for me. So the other aspect of the getting help is recognizing that I sought for a therapy appointment a few days later. Uh, there was a lot of healing involved in that encounter, of the holding space, even in an objective manner, and then giving me some options on how to move forward, like setting the time limit. Because honestly, it had already cost me a lot of emotional and physical currency by that point. So I chose to not create more harm to her, even though she harmed me in my car, even though no justice is going to come of the situation. I'm going to accept that. I don't condone it, but I'm accepting that and I'm moving forward. There were also, in terms of like looking for help, moments that I wanted to share with you that really restored my faith in other human beings. On that long walk that I was invited to that same weekend after the accident, there were lost items that were seen on the street, like really nice earphones, keys, another offering a nice shower chair. And there were notes attached to each of these items saying, have you lost this? Or like, do you want this for free? So that was really endearing to see. And I noticed that this was in such a high concentration during the walk that I can't imagine if there was some synchronicity with the timing of the walk and what I had just gone through. And the universe's reminder in that, by and large, all human beings have the capacity to be inherently good. So even though the driver left, others really showed up. I showed up for myself. The mindfulness practice in all of this is being in the discomfort and simply noticing it, not judging it, not trying to resist all of that emotional and physical discomfort. And then also being very intentional without judging myself, without labeling myself as being weak for seeking out sources of support, for instance. In fact, that's actually a strength, is to seek out sources of support and help, especially during difficult experiences. And that even as helpers, as healers, as leaders of other healers, as caregivers, as leaders within your own family, of potentially being the eldest daughter, eldest child, that we can give ourselves permission to receive help rather than automatically being the helper, even the helper for ourselves. Because sometimes you really need to lean on the support of others when you yourself are suffering. The other aspect that made me realize that a lot of work had happened with the years of mindfulness practice, therapy, and coaching, that there are a lot of inherent inner resources that we don't give ourselves enough credit for. So tremendous resilience showed up, and that there's a keen difference because after the accident, there was, yeah, an initial fear of having to drive again and get on the road and having to merge into really busy highway traffic that was going many, many miles over the speed limit. That I was feeling a little bit afraid of driving, but I was still capable of driving. It wasn't that I was incapable of driving. And that I trusted my 30 plus years of being a pretty safe driver all around, that I could continue to still drive. Honestly, it would have been easier to just take a break from driving, but I had decided very intentionally that I was going to live my life and go on with my life as best as I could. So, in fact, I was scheduled to go to a Pink concert sponsored by Curebound for cancer research that very next evening with members of my cancer survivor dragon boat team. That accident definitely wouldn't have hindered me unless I was like physically unable to. And then that next day after, I was scheduled to drive to Riverside for my youngest West Coast US Parkour Regional Championship competition, and then drive immediately after that to Anaheim to watch Stars on Ice. And all of this was occurring on my 15th cancerversary. So May 16th, on my cancerversary, I still decided to go and drive myself and loved ones on the highway to those events because I had planned to do so and I still wanted to experience those events despite everything that had happened. I decided that I was going to write the ending. I was going to write the remainder of my story after the hit and run accident. So ultimately, even though I was in physical pain, I decided and chose to go on, of course, with the blessing of healthcare professionals as best as I could. I was gentle with myself, though, recognizing my limits. So I did cancel some plans to go indoor rock climbing the very next week because my back was still in pain. But I instead then opted for a long but quite overzealous extended barefoot beach walk that wasn't so good for my back. And then a massage occurred thereafter. And incidentally, on the day of the accident, I had a massage that same day, but I ended up just postponing that by 1 week. And it was tremendously helpful to get the healing process very intentionally put into action. So there's a lot of like gentleness with myself, a lot of checking in with my physical pain. And then I remember also the intention on the day of the accident to do something kind for another human being. Like, even though something maliciously intended had happened to me, I was going to transmutate that experience into a positive one. So I distinctly remember seeing a University of Maryland, my medical school alma mater, invite alumni to contribute to stethoscope funds for their upcoming white coat ceremony and to write a note of encouragement. So I donated, and I have wanted to donate to this fund for a while now, but today, that day of the accident, was going to be the day. So I chose my note to include self care and the motivation behind all of that was to, even though this something bad had happened to me, I wanted to put out intentional good into the world, even on that same day. And honestly, it made me feel very empowered to do so. I think going back to what was it within my control was I could transmutate, and this word has been kind of a theme over the last couple of weeks of my life, transmutate like an otherwise bad, labeled bad, unfortunate, painful situation into something that was good, that I wanted to put out something good in the world. So, similar to how I'm sharing, hopefully, will help you navigate in your own life's challenges. And you may notice that there's extra background noise now. I hear some landscaping happening, but we're just going to roll with the punches and continue on, because how appropriate for the landscapers to be cutting down extra branches unexpectedly during this time of me recording this podcast on unexpected life events. So I will continue intentionally to continue to go on. So there was also an emotional growth component. There was a confidence that emerged from having gone through this experience rather than forcing positive thinking, forcing that I was resisting the negative and trying to force a positive. I simply kept going. I simply kept driving. I kept up with what I wanted to do, my social plans, my voluntary momming, my fangirling at watching the stars on ice. And in order to do so, I realized I still needed to be quite mobile within my car to move myself and my loved ones to places that I had intentionally scheduled. And that reaffirmed the trust in myself as a safe driver, but also getting back on the road and trusting other motorists who 99% of the time are helpful and compassionate and stay in their own lanes and follow the law. Okay, maybe not 99% of the time, but like a pretty high percentage. So the main realization is that I can handle hard things even when I don't want to, even though I don't want those hard things. And we can meet hard things that happen in life even when we don't want to. Sometimes we don't really have a choice. But our choice lies in the fact of how we handle those hard things. So some of the emotional consequences, though, were some hypervigilance when I was driving and pangs of anxiety on the road, especially when an unexpected event happened on the road, like a sudden merge, someone cut me off, someone wanting to pass me or merge. So there was still a little bit of anxiety on the road immediately after, but that has definitely since lessened, and I'm much closer to baseline now compared to my baseline driving before the accident. It's way, way, way better now. And I think part of that is the inherent self-trust in myself as a driver. Then, and that reflection wouldn't have occurred unless the accident happened. The accident also was an invitation to slow down. So unexpected events can reveal the pace at which we're actually living, the tendency to move immediately into fixing, solving, and doing things like as healers, as caregivers, we're trained to do. And then that there's an inherent wisdom in allowing for some time for recovery and reflection in the space that can that it can take up and that's needed to take up. In the immediate aftermath, and then in reflecting back to you in the immediate aftermath, I realized basically what's next after the accident is up to me. I can heal on my own pace, on my own terms, on my own timeline. I can take my own power back in my response, in the actions and circumstances that I create after the accident. And in doing so, I chose to ask for help. I received it and I sought and I truly felt and allowed the support to land, to feel loved, to feel unconditionally supported. I will say that I'm a more cautious driver, especially when I'm about to merge in busy traffic along freeway entrances and exits. So, yes, that accident definitely made me more mindful of that aspect of driving in California highway traffic. So, some gentle practices moving forward of how you can choose to respond after an unexpected event it happens or is happening or has happened. So, giving yourself a chance to pause before you react, checking in with your body, especially on the day of, throughout the day, allowing, especially the difficult emotions, to move through your body, your mind without any judgment. And then to bring in gratitude for ordinary moments, gratitude for the goodness of others that are often overlooked, especially when quote unquote something bad that we label has happened. Sometimes life's interruptions become invitations to pay closer attention. And so I hope that by sharing what happened to me and the processing that I went through and am going through has been helpful for you. And so I'm going to end today's episode with some reflection questions for you. What unexpected event in your life continues to hold lessons that you haven't fully explored? When things don't go according to plan, what's been your first reaction? Who or what has supported you during difficult seasons that you may have overlooked? What would it look like to trust yourself and others a little more in the face of uncertainty? Could difficult moments reveal lessons we might otherwise never learn? And what if the most meaningful growth comes not from avoiding hardship, but from how we meet it? So, with my hit and run accident, when life literally hits you, life can change in an instant. Sometimes the events we would never choose become profound teachers. My cancer survivorship, for instance, has been one of my wisest teachers. I have a feeling this hit and run accident is going to also become one of my wisest teachers, but I'm not quite ready to go there yet in terms of labeling it as a wise teacher. It's been a catalyst for some wise lessons, let's put it that way. This experience has definitely reminded me that mindfulness is not reserved for peaceful mornings, meditation cushions, or quiet, reflective, slow paced retreats. It becomes potentially even more important in moments of disruption, uncertainty, and life threatening stress. We might not control what happens to us, but we can cultivate awareness of how we meet what happens. We can notice our reactions, give ourselves permission to ask for and receive support, practice self compassion, and gradually learn to trust ourselves and others through life's unexpected turns. We get to ultimately choose our response. So, if this conversation resonates with you, would you consider spending a few moments reflecting on a challenge that potentially has changed you? What did it reveal about your own strength, your values, or your capacity to begin again? Thanks so much for joining me on today's episode. And I hope that by sharing my story and my insights through the ongoing processing of this hit and run accident was helpful for you. If you found this episode to be helpful, please share this episode with others. Please leave us some positive reviews and stars. It helps others find us. And it's not too late to join Jessie and me at the Connect in Nature retreat later in July. In fact, Jessie's birthday is going to be happening during the Connect in Nature retreat. To help heal the nervous system, I'm going to be there to help guide and also heal my nervous system. And you can also hire me or Jessie to speak or develop a well-being workshop for you or any group of your choosing focused on mindfulness, coaching, and well-being. Thanks so much for listening. Please stay on after the sound of the singing bowl for our mindful moment offering. Thanks for listening. If our message resonates, we'd love to connect further. Join us for coaching, mindfulness experiences, workshops, and retreats. Invite us to speak at your institution or conference. When you work with us, you don't just consume information, you create real change. Find Ni-Chang Liang at Awakened Breath and Jessie Mahoney at Pause and Presence. Welcome to this mindful moment offering. This is a practice that I'm going to be leading during the Connect in Nature retreat. So I'd love for you to join me in person. I think it makes all the difference to experience this in person. But be that as it may, I'm happy to guide you in a remote practice coming in through your ear. So closing eyes if it's safe for you to do so, or lowering your gaze a few inches in front of you. In fact, inviting you to do this practice outside in nature if possible. So begin by noticing the support of the ground beneath you, whether you're standing or sitting, the points of contact between you and the supporting surface beneath you. Coming back to noticing your breath. Your breath can always serve as an anchor to refocus, to re-guide, to bring your attention back to a fixed, intentional point of focus. And next, inviting you to notice what you're hearing. So noticing the sounds all around you, maybe holding off on labeling the sounds that you're hearing, but simply resting in the experience of listening. Coming back to listening to the environment that you're in the middle of right now. And next, inviting you to open your eyes and look all around you, using your sense of sight, noticing colors and the appearance of textures, brightness. Again, not necessarily labeling what you see, but simply resting in the felt experience of seeing and looking all around you, even behind you, below you, what's above you. Seeing what's all around. And as you're ready, closing your eyes again, taking a deep breath in and blowing out birthday candles. Focusing on your sense of smell. Is there anything that you smell? Are you noticing that you're quick to label what you're smelling or judge what you're smelling as good, bad, or neutral? But dropping labels and simply resting in the middle of being able to smell or even not able to smell, if that is your direct felt experience of your sense of smell right now in this moment. And then as you're ready, moving to notice your sense of touch. So we began by noticing the sports of contact between you and your surrounding environment. So now focusing on the sensations of the skin, perhaps of clothing atop your skin, of a breeze or temperature atop your skin, of different areas of pressure atop your skin, like from the ground or a chair that you might be sitting or standing on. And then next, seeing if you can taste anything, not necessarily trying to find something to taste, but in your mouth, are you able to notice anything that you just ate or drank? Or is there nothing there at all? Just noticing the sense of taste. Again, not labeling, but resting in the middle of your sense of taste. And even if there's no taste or if your taste is absent, that is still part of your felt lived experience. And as you're ready, inviting you to come back to your breath wherever you feel it the most, at the nostrils, at the back of the throat, at your chest, at your abdomen, simply noticing where you feel your breath the most. And coming back to that as an anchor, your focus of attention. Taking 3 deep breaths with me if you feel called to do so, inhaling through the nose, filling up and blowing out birthday candles. 2 more times in through the nose, filling up and breathing out birthday candles. And one last time, inhaling through the nose and blowing out birthday candles. Checking in with how you feel now compared to a few minutes ago. When you feel ready, blinking open eyes, letting the light back in. Thanks so much for practicing with me today.